Have you ever been hungry? Like deeply hungry, like that deep kind of hunger? By the grace of God, most of us here have probably never experienced that kind of deep, profound hunger. The kind that for most of human existence was the ever-looming fear, the ever-looming danger. We are blessed not to worry about if there'll be food in the grocery store or not. But if we aren't hungry, then why can I eat a whole bag of potato chips in one sitting? Or why do I finish off a whole pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream? And don't even get me started with all-you-can-eat buffets. I can eat and still be hungry. I can eat and eat, but not be satisfied. Which begs the question, what does it mean to be hungry? What does it mean to be satisfied? And it's not just a physical hunger, but we have an intellectual and experiential hunger too. Why do I binge watch whole seasons of a TV show in one day? Or read a book in one sitting? Or scroll the internet, reading article after article, thirsting to know things, hungry for knowledge? And why do I keep working well after the needed hours, just to work? And yet, with all that, I never seem to be satisfied. So maybe we are hungry. In fact, I think all these facts reveal a deep truth, that we have a voracious hunger in our hearts, that we are famished. But what are we famished for? We're famished for God. We are starving for the infinite God to fill the caverns of our hearts. Ever since we walked away from him in the garden, ever since we rejected love himself, we have been famished. All of human history bears the scars of us trying to satisfy that hunger, that deep, gaping hunger that all the sacrifices and wars and revelries could never fill. And so God stepped in, and in the fullness of time, he sent his Son. And so we hear in today's gospel, people came to Jesus. Why? Because they were hungry. They had come to him the day before, as we heard in the gospel last week, and Jesus had multiplied the bread and the fish, and they all had eaten. But today they were hungry again. And so now Jesus is revealing something more, something deeper. He says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst. You came looking for bread, but what you actually want is life. What you actually want is God. And then, at the Last Supper, as he does at every Mass, Jesus took bread and he made it into his body. And he took the wine and made it into his blood. Why? Why did he do it then? Why does he do it now? Because we are hungry. Because nothing else will satisfy. There once was a man named John. John grew up in France during the French Revolution, a time when the world went mad with hunger. Hunger for power, hunger for this false idea of liberty, hunger for the overthrow of what had come before. And in the midst of this madness, Catholicism was outlawed. And because of this, John and his family, and numerous other Catholics throughout France, were faced with the choice. To go to Mass, to be caught attending a Mass, face the penalty of death. Or they go without the bread of life, which is a worse kind of death. John and his family, they knew this simple truth. They needed the Eucharist. They needed Jesus. And the darker things became, the more that became true, not less. And so they would sneak out in the middle of the night into a field, into some barn far off, to find some brave priest who was willing to celebrate a Mass, to give them the one thing that gave life, to risk their lives for the one thing that could truly satisfy. If I really believed that this was the bread of life, if I really believed that this was the one thing that could truly satisfy the deepest longing of my heart, what wouldn't I risk? What wouldn't I risk? When John grew up, after the revolution, he became a priest. And after a few years, he was sent to a country parish. Not like St. Pat's. No, this was a small town, a simple church. Maybe like old St. Pat's. But what he found there, it shocked him. that there were more people in the taverns, there were more people in the fields on Sunday than in the parish. That he who as a boy had literally risked his life to be able to go to Mass every week, that here were people, here were Catholics, totally without devotion to the Eucharist, totally ignoring what was being offered to them every Sunday. And so what did Father John do? Well, he had to help them remember their hunger. He had to help them remember their hunger. Because this is the crazy thing. In our woundedness, in our brokenness, we can shovel enough in there to numb our hearts. We can shovel enough in there to try to numb the hunger, to convince ourselves that we are fine. But we still have this voracious hunger. And if we will not feed on God, then we will feed on something else, and it will leave us even more famished. We all have to answer that question of the human heart: where will I go with my hunger? Where will I go to be satisfied? We hear in the second reading today from Ephesians, "Put away the old self with your former way of life, corrupted through deceitful desires." Deceitful desires. What does that mean? Well, the great author C.S. Lewis, he puts it this way. He says, "It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased." See, our desires often deceive us because we don't actually follow them deep enough, because we settle for what we think we can get, what we think we deserve, what we think we can control. We're like the Israelites, calling out, "Would that we had died at the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, as we sat by our flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. But you had to lead us into this desert to make the whole community die of famine." Not really sure what a flesh pot is, but they were willing to trade their freedom, their birthright, for bread. Well, at least we don't feel hungry. Yes, but you are slaves. And so the Lord had to lead them into the desert. He had to lead them out of Egypt, away from their flesh pots, so they could remember their hunger. But more importantly, so they could remember and learn who it was who truly satisfies. Father John, with his parish, had to do the same. He had to help his people remember their hunger. And with perseverance, with mercy, with intense love, Father John started inviting them back to encounter what truly satisfies. He would go to parishioners' homes. He would go out into the fields and even to the taverns on Sundays to invite them instead to come to church, to call them back. Why? Because he hated fun? No, because he knew that he had to get them away from the things that were numbing their hearts, from the things they were trying to use to satisfy that hunger that could never be filled. Friends, we need to do the same. We need to remember our hunger. We need to allow ourselves to hunger for God. How do we do that? Well, we have to stop trying to fill our hearts with anything and everything else. We know what we do. We know what we do when we feel that discomfort, that hunger. We eat, we watch, we drink, we scroll, we reach for whatever can distract us for a little while. But what if instead we put down the phone or the bottle or that bag of chips or that pint of Ben & Jerry's? What if instead we picked up our Bible or our rosary or just turned to the Lord in that moment? We turned to the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings and just said to him honestly from the depth of our heart, "Lord, I am hungry." That's what St. John Vianney did, who the church honors today. That's what he taught. That's what Father John taught to those people of Ars, France. To turn to God with their hunger. To come to Jesus, here present in the Eucharist. To come to him with the deepest longings of our hearts. Because he is the only one who satisfies.